Geoff, great to see you. I'll get right to business here. Okamoto is getting posted by the Yomiuri Giants of NPB. There are some people that think that he has a significantly higher floor than Murakami, who's the current big name that is going to be signed by a team this offseason. Your thoughts on him?
Yeah, I think that's probably a pretty accurate assessment of the two players. When you're looking at a player like Murakami, you're looking at potential 40 home run power. If he's able to make enough consistent contact here, there's some questions as to whether he does that or not. He's a very limited defender. On the other side of the coin with Okamoto, you're talking about a guy that is a very polished contact hitter with approach. There's some power. I think at least from like a data perspective, he catches a lot of clean barrels. I don't think it's all that different from like a Kyle Manzardo in terms of how he gets to his power, where like the top end exit velocities, you're not going to see him hit a ball 114, but he'll consistently hit the ball between 95 and 105 at good angles. Doesn't miss in the zone all that much. Good approach. And he's a better defender than Murakami. Yeah. It's been a few years since he won a Gold Glove over there, but was a Gold Glove third baseman in 21 and 22. Talking to folks that have scouted him over there, I was getting 55s in the glove, so an above average defender at third base. And I was getting 70s at first base. He did play first base in the WBC. I think it's because they didn't necessarily trust Murakami to play first base. But he was really good over there, was one of the better hitters in the tournament. You can argue was probably their best hitter in that 2023 tournament. And had a huge home run. I think people forget he had the go-ahead home run in that deciding game against the U.S. in the WBC finals. So he has hit against big leaguers before. I do think the floor is a lot higher. He's a lot older at 29 years old, but at the same time, this is a guy that kind of is plug and play for any team that signs him.
I saw Okamoto in 2019 when he played for Team Samurai, and I thought he was a very polished hitter, and now he's obviously coming off of a tremendous platform year where he hit 330-ish, which will definitely up his value. Is there fear that that power will be exploited in Major League Baseball? Only because away from home, I think he had like a 2% home run rate. Like it was 2 home runs every 100 at bats. It wasn't much outside of the Tokyo Dome in for the Giants. Like, is that a fear that they're just going to hit the bat out of his hands essentially in the big leagues here?
Yeah, I don't think so. I mean, I think there's still enough consistent power. Like his average EV is like 92.5. And I think if you watch the at-bats pretty consistently, he catches up to velocity. Like they don't see a ton of 95 plus over there, but they see enough. There's enough of a sample size over the last however many years to kind of look at that. The other thing is he had an elbow injury to begin the season this year, so he missed some time, which is why like the overall numbers maybe like counting stat wise, home run totals, etc., don't meet what he had done in previous seasons. But I think you look at the overall slash line, strikeout rate, contact rate, all that sort of stuff. The quality of the at bats was getting a lot better. And I think some of that stuff, splits from year to year can be kind of fluky. 1 year a guy is putting up, granted, there are like D.D. Gregorius and like Yankee Stadium type of things where like, sure, that plays to his swing. He has enough power and enough skills that, yeah, I don't think he's going to hit 40 home runs like he did in Japan over here. But I think putting him in that like 18 to 25 bucket with like a 275 average and good on base percentage, you can play him and expect above average or better defense at both infield corners. Like it's a pretty valuable player.
I know Murakami's gotten hit with he might struggle against high velo. I actually was looking at Okamoto. Yeah, hitting better lately against high velocity. Just trying to make comps here back and forth since Murakami's getting so much attention. Do you think there is any chance that Okamoto actually ends up with a better deal? I know Murakami's younger, but maybe more of an average annual value to what he signs, or Murakami is still more coveted in the market?
I struggle with that because I think when you're looking at just the player like in a vacuum, like the next 2 years, like you probably do prefer Okamoto. But I do think the age difference and just we know how that impacts models in the draft, let alone in free agency. There just aren't a lot of guys with 80 raw power and the ability to consistently get to it with some track record against higher level pitching. Not a lot of those guys get to the market very often. So I think you're going to see more years with Murakami. The annual value might be a little bit closer than people expect. I still anticipate Murakami getting more. And, maybe this isn't something that fans necessarily want to think of, but I do think when these guys are signing over here, there's almost like a marketing factor to it. Like you're getting yourself into that Japanese marketplace that we know can be incredibly profitable. And a guy like Murakami, I mean, his nickname is more or less like God over there. So I think he's one of like the 3 or 4 biggest stars in Japan. So there's probably like some of that coming into it too, that his dollar and his ask is probably just going to be higher.
So for Okamoto and Murakami, who do you think, like what teams do you think are going to go after both of these guys? Is there any teams you have in mind, or is it like, hey man, they can work out for any team right now?
I think there's obviously a lot of teams that these guys would potentially be a great fit for. I wonder about Okamoto maybe being a potential Red Sox option, just based on where they're at with the third base position. I don't know how much they necessarily believe in Marcelo Meyer going into next year. They could. It's going to depend on whether he can actually finish a full season healthy for the first time in his life. That hasn't happened yet. So I don't think like that's an absurd one. Certainly, I think the Yankees could be in play on either of these guys. We've heard the Blue Jays kind of kicking around some of these names. The Rangers are always in on these guys. I've heard that the Dodgers are out, but we also hear the Dodgers are out, and then 2 weeks later, all of a sudden, they're in the running. So I think there'll be I would be surprised if at least half of the teams in the league don't take meetings with these guys. And it's kind of the same with Tatsuya Imai, who's the top pitcher that's coming over. That, like, for my money, based on my evaluations and the calls and the things that I've done with scouts that have worked over there, I think he's actually the top player that's coming over in terms of what his impact could be. So it'll be kind of interesting. I would imagine at least half the teams are going to be on this. Obviously, there's going to be some teams that probably aren't going to meet the asking price on the 3 big free agents coming over. The Pirates, those sort of teams that just don't break past those thresholds. The Guardians, I'd be really shocked if they're in on them, but you never know.
I'm with you on Imai. I'm on the high side there from what I've read and what I've seen. I think he's a 1 or a 2. I've seen some people throw out his career walk numbers. I'm like, yeah, I'd rather look at the last year or 2 where the command's gotten better. So I ask about him because the other news that broke is Kona Takahashi. And Takahashi also will likely link with a major league club over the next month or so. So what do you think about him? We can mix in some comps about how much better, obviously, Imai is and the upside for him. But what do you think about Takahashi, first of all, who's now officially fresh on the market as well?
Yeah, so this is a case of I've actually heard some people bring up that they think the reason Imai was posted when he was because they held the bag too long on Takahashi. This is a guy that I think would have commanded a lot more a few years ago. The stuff is kind of ticked down. He doesn't have swing and miss stuff. The only pitch in his arsenal that had a 30+% miss rate across the 4 primary pitches that he throws was his slider, which is a pretty decent pitch over there. It's a little bit like a sweepery curveball. It's got a little bit of drop, a little bit of tilt. So like when I look at a player like this who throws 93 miles an hour, doesn't ride it a whole ton, doesn't have interesting release traits, a lot of it is pitchability. And historically, we've seen players like this come over from Japan and typically not have a lot of success. So, I don't know how much money he'll even command, if it might be a short-term deal, maybe, a couple of years. I'd be surprised if he's anywhere even in shouting distance of, Okamoto, Imai, or Murakami.
Okay. Do you have any comps for the 4 guys that we're talking about, major league guys, for any of them? Have you written up any comps at BA for Murakami or Takahashi or Imai, Okamoto, etc.? And I ask it in 2 ways. One is any comps for current big leaguers that we're looking at or former big leaguers. And also, like you said, with someone like Takahashi coming over and that particular profile not playing well, have we seen other players from overseas come over with that profile and that success in another league and it not play well here because of the stuff?
Yeah. So, we're looking at comps. I think the Murakami comp, and I think you got to sort of look at it with a scale, right? Like there's probably a high end comp of like, this is what the ceiling is. If things go well, maybe he's, Eugenio Suarez, which, big power, kind of fringy defense at third base, but can play it. And I think that's an area where Murakami really needs to improve. So I think that's kind of like what the high end outcome is. The lower end outcome, I think, just in terms of like the bat, I think is very similar to like Joey Gallo, where there could be big home run stretches where he carries your team for a few weeks, and there could be really low lows where he's hitting a buck for a month and he's just not connecting, and the strikeouts are ugly. Joey Gallo was a very good athlete, of course. I mean, he's made the transition now, or is trying to make the transition to pitching, but was a good outfielder. Like Murakami doesn't have any of those sort of skills to fall back on. So I think that's kind of the range of outcomes. Like I think there's going to be some strikeouts here. There's going to be home runs. But just, how much contact can he make ultimately is going to decide what his ceiling is. When I look at Okamoto, it's a little harder. The name that kind of came to mind, and this is like a throwback name, it's kind of like Bill Miller, where like he was a really reliable defensive third baseman, was a really consistent hitter, made contact, good approach, but it was probably like mid-teens power. I think there might be a little bit more power here than there was with Bill Miller, but Bill Miller obviously was a very good player. So that's kind of the first one that comes to mind. Like currently, I'm trying to think about somebody off the top of my head that's, an above average third baseman that maybe doesn't have 30 home run power. And nothing's coming to mind. I think like Alex Bregman is probably a little bit too rich.
Evan Longoria?
I don't think like outside of like, no, not MVP Evan Longoria, but yeah, I think that's not a terrible comp in terms of what he can do.
Let me ask you this offseason. Oh, go ahead. You done?
Sure. No, go right ahead.
I interrupted you there, but yes, it seems like this offseason there's more Japanese guys being posted and wanting to come over here. Do you think it's been a smoother transition for them to come over here into the big leagues, into the United States? I mean, I feel like this is going to keep continuing as we see a guy like Shohei Ohtani and, the Yakamotos and all the other guys of the world that are going out there and dominating.
Yeah, I think, we've seen some of the biggest stars come over here, and, I don't know if there's kind of been a standard established over the last, we'll say almost 10 years of like, if you're one of the best players in the world, you have to come over here and kind of prove yourself. Every time I talk to folks over there or scouts over here, it is always sort of a concern in terms of like the initial touchdown in Major League Baseball. I think for a lot of these guys can be a little bit rough because of that, cultural divide and just getting yourself sort of settled into a new country and a completely different culture. And even just in terms of like how their workout days go, like their baseball days, game day, all that sort of stuff, all that sort of things are very different from what a lot of them had even experienced in Japan. So obviously the language barrier, all that sort of stuff. Do I think it's getting a little bit easier? Sure. I think, teams are more cognizant of it in terms of making sure that all these guys have the resources to, have the smoothest possible transition. And I think that modern technology probably helps out with some of the translation stuff that, in 1995 just wasn't available or easily accessible. So I think some of all of that stuff is probably getting baked into it a little bit more now. And we're seeing more and more of these players come over.